Kung Fu Panda gave us some of the most unhinged meltdowns in animated history, and honestly, most of them were completely valid. So today, we're ranking the most valid crash outs in Kung Fu Panda history. First up, the Furious Five. We start here because the Furious Five's reaction to Po being chosen as the Dragon Warrior is one of the most understandable meltdowns in the entire series.
Master, are you pointing at me?
Him? Who?
These five have trained their entire lives. Tigress has been at the Jade Palace since she was a child. Crane almost didn't make the cut. Mantis is the size of a protein shake but still shows up every single day, fully committed. Viper could end you with a single move and somehow remains the most emotionally regulated member of the group. Monkey has been doing this long enough that he should legally be retired by now. Years of discipline, sacrifice, dedication, and then Oogway points at a panda who fell out of a fireworks cannon. That panda is the Dragon Warrior. I mean, really, sir? The look on Tigress's face when the scroll unfurled and there was nothing inside.
It's blank. What?
Said everything that needed to be said. She did not yell. She did not throw anything. She just had that face. The one that says, I have processed this, and I have chosen silence, because words cannot capture what I am feeling right now. That face has a PhD in restraint. Were they mean to Po? Absolutely. They spend the first act trying to make him quit. Did it work? No, because Po is built differently, and also built like a marshmallow. But this crash out did not come from nowhere. It came from years of sacrifice, being brushed aside in 30 seconds by a tortoise who gave absolutely no explanation. No town hall, no announcement, no here's my methodology, just a finger, a panda, and chaos. Yeah, I'm giving the Furious Five a solid 7 out of 10 on the crash out scale. They had every right to be upset. They just maybe didn't need a full week of psychological warfare. Now, the character who had to stand there and watch that finger point somewhere else and then somehow still had to manage the fallout was Shifu, and his crash out is somehow even quieter, which is worse. This man raised Tai Lung. He trained him. He told him every single day that he was special, that he was destined for greatness, that the Dragon Scroll had his name on it. He invested everything into this cub, took him in, built a whole future around him, and then the moment Oogway said no, Shifu crumbled, and he did not say a single word in Tai Lung's defense.
You were not meant to be the Dragon Warrior. That was not my fault.
Not one. He watched his son get denied and imprisoned. He stood there and said nothing. And instead of doing anything with that guilt, Shifu spent the next 20 years becoming the most emotionally unavailable master in all of ancient China. He did not process the grief. He laminated it and hung it on the wall as a personality trait. By the time Po shows up, Shifu is a walking trauma response wrapped in red fur. He cannot encourage anyone. His default setting is criticism. His idea of a pep talk is structured like a performance review that ends with needs improvement and no action items. He pushes Po to the edge within the first session, and when Oogway dies and leaves him responsible for a panda who cannot complete a single basic exercise, Shifu genuinely breaks. He sits alone in the dark, in the rain, processing nothing, saying nothing, staring into the middle distance like a man who has been on hold with his own emotions for 2 decades and just got disconnected again. That is not a villain arc. That is a therapist's waiting room that was never once used. The crash out makes complete sense because Shifu was only ever taught to be perfect, not how to handle failure, not how to process guilt, not how to have a single honest conversation with someone he loves.
Shifu loved Tai Lung like he had never loved anyone before.
Oogway taught him discipline, patience, and inner peace, and somehow skipped the module on basic emotional communication entirely. When things stopped being perfect, he had no tools for what came next. No framework, no fallback, just silence and increasingly aggressive training sessions. Someone needed to check on this man years before Po arrived. Nobody did, and the Valley almost paid for it twice. So Shifu gets an 8 out of 10 on the crash out scale. Decades of unprocessed guilt, 0 outlets, and somehow still showing up to work every day. If that's not a valid crash out, I don't know what is. The next character also involves a crash out rooted in being sidelined by someone else's spotlight, except this time, it's quieter, more sustained, and honestly more relatable than anyone wants to admit. It's Mei Mei from Kung Fu Panda 3. Mei Mei does not crash out dramatically. She sustains a quiet, ongoing meltdown across the entire third film.
How can one panda be so beautiful?
and it is genuinely warranted. She is a ribbon dancer who has clearly been the main character of her own story for as long as she can remember. Confident, talented, committed. She has actual routines. She has actual choreography. She has clearly spent years perfecting a craft that nobody in this panda village is giving nearly enough credit for. And then Po arrives, and the entire panda village immediately pivots. Dragon Warrior this, Dragon Warrior that. Suddenly, the visitor with the identity crisis is the most important person in the room. Mei Mei is supposed to step aside and perform for morale.
Get ready to dance with danger!
She has been working her whole life. She has developed real skills. Skills with a prop, which is significantly harder than it looks, and it already looks hard. And she is now being asked to play second fiddle to a panda who did not even know he was a panda 20 minutes ago in movie time. Her reaction is not explosive. It is restrained, almost calm, which makes it simultaneously funnier and more valid. The quiet crash out is always scarier than the loud one, because at least the loud one tells you where you stand. Mei Mei just smiles and continues being completely correct about everything. And by the third act, she proves herself legitimately useful in the final battle. She fought with ribbons, actual ribbons, against Jade Warriors, and the movie gave her a nod and moved on. We see you, Mei Mei. The understated crash out was completely earned, and you deserved a post-credits scene at minimum. On the crash out scale, I'm gonna give Mei Mei a 7.5 out of 10. She showed up, she performed, she saved the day with ribbons, and the movie still handed her a participation trophy. From someone who deserved more screen time, we move to Lord Shen, who deserved more than a prophecy handed to him at childhood. This is where things get complicated in a real way. Lord Shen was told by a soothsayer that a warrior of black and white would one day defeat him. His response was to commit a mass atrocity in an attempt to prevent it. That is completely unhinged behavior. To be absolutely clear, we are not normalizing the canon collection. We are not endorsing the harbor situation. But here's the part the movie moves past too quickly. After what Shen did, his own parents exiled him. The peacocks who should have guided him, who raised him, who commissioned the soothsayer in the first place, looked at what happened and decided the answer was to send him away permanently. Not rehabilitation, not accountability with a path forward, not even a difficult conversation about what had gone wrong and why. Just banishment. Just gone. So Shen spent years in exile, building weapons and feeding a grudge that his own family helped construct. He did not stumble into villainy. He was handed the first ingredient and then left alone with it for long enough that it fermented into something genuinely dangerous. He became the villain they were afraid of before anyone gave him a genuine reason to be something else.
China will be mine.
You're goddamn right.
The crash out during his confrontation with Po is one of the most tragic moments in the entire franchise. He is completely convinced the universe was always working against him. He cannot see, does not want to see, has actively chosen not to see that he kept walking toward it.
A peacock is defeated by a warrior of black and white.
What?
But you can trace every step, from the prophecy to the exile to the cannons to the harbor to the rain. It is all connected. When your parents remove you from your home because of something they feared and then give you nothing to rebuild with, you do not just move on cleanly from that. You build an empire of resentment with extremely good structural integrity. Shen gets a 6 out of 10 on the crash out scale. The original crash out was valid. Everything after that was a personal choice, and he made every single one of those choices with full commitment and zero hesitation. Shen got exiled by his family, but the next character is Kai, and he got exiled by his best friend, which is somehow more personal, and the timeline is significantly longer. Kai's situation is one of the most genuinely overlooked betrayals in this franchise. This man saved Oogway's life on a battlefield, carried him. That is not a throwaway detail. That is the entire basis of their friendship. They were brothers in the truest sense of the word, and in return, Oogway taught him everything he knew about Chi. Full access, no asterisks, no fine print, just here. This is sacred knowledge. I trust you completely. And then Oogway noticed that Kai was using Chi to take power rather than give it. And instead of addressing it, instead of one honest conversation, one intervention, one single attempt at redirection, Oogway sent him to the spirit realm for 500 years. No hearing, no explanation, just gone. Because Oogway had made a decision and apparently preferred the clean exit over the uncomfortable conversation. He chose administrative action over friendship. He filed the paperwork and moved on with his enlightenment journey. Very convenient timing.
With your chi, I will finally be able to return to the mortal world.
When Kai finally escapes and shows up furious, the movie frames him as the antagonist. And in terms of methods, yes, mass jade collection is not a coping mechanism anyone should recommend. Turning kung fu masters into little green figurines is not the path to healing, but the source of the rage? Valid. Completely and obviously valid. Oogway betrayed the person who trusted him most, exiled him for 5 centuries, then achieved enlightenment so he never once had to face what he had done. That is not wisdom. That is the most decorated form of conflict avoidance in animated film history. Oogway ascended to a higher plane specifically to avoid this conversation, and we should all sit with that for a moment. Kai deserved one honest conversation.
Well, now I'm ready for a rematch.
Took you long enough.
He got 500 years of solitude and no explanation. He went about it wrong, but he deserved better. Kai gets a whooping 9 out of 10 on the crash out scale. 500 years, with no visitors, for a crime his best friend never bothered to explain to him. The only reason it's not a 10 is because the jade figurine thing was genuinely a choice. And finally, there is Tai Lung, who deserves his own category entirely because he is the most complicated character on this list. He is not number 1, but he is the most complicated because almost everything he says is technically accurate and almost everything he does is completely indefensible. He is arguing a valid case using methods that immediately invalidate the argument. He is somehow both right and the reason nobody can agree that he's right. He was raised from cubhood to believe he was the Dragon Warrior. That was not something he invented. That was curriculum. Shifu built his entire identity around that promise. Every session, every achievement, every milestone reinforced the same message. This is who you are. This is what you're for.
You knew I was the Dragon Warrior.
You always knew.
He did not develop a sense of self independent of that destiny because he was never given the space or the tools to do so. Shifu built the entire house on one foundation and never told anyone that was risky. Oogway said no with no explanation. Shifu said nothing.
Nothing.
And Tai Lung got a prison cell for 20 years. No answers, no acknowledgement, no conversation about what had been done to him, or why, or what it meant. Just a dungeon, a very stressed rhino guard, and the memory of a future that was apparently never real. When he came back, the crash out was not surprising, not justified in terms of what he did. The destruction, the rampage, the part where he fought everyone in his path. None of that makes the valid list. There is no rubric on which attempted murder of your entire former life scores points. But the moment he holds the dragon scroll and it's empty, that is the crash out. Right there. That single image is the whole argument. A man who was told his entire life that the scroll contained his destiny holds it and it is blank. Not mislabeled, not lost, blank. It was always blank. The thing his entire identity was built around contained nothing.
It's nothing.
That is not a twist. That is a reckoning. You cannot build someone's entire identity around a promise and then pull it away without consequences. You cannot tell someone their whole life that they are special and then offer no explanation when the story changes. Shifu believed he could. He believed he could just move on, just redirect, just find the next student, and repeat the process. The valley paid for it. Po eventually fixed it. But let's be very clear about where the bill originated. So for the final crash out scale, Tai Lung gets an 8.5 out of 10. The crash out was completely earned, the execution was completely unhinged, and somewhere in the middle of all of that is a snow leopard who just wanted someone to tell him the truth. Nobody did. And that is the thing about Kung Fu Panda that barely anyone actually talks about. Every single crash out in this franchise has a receipt. There is always a moment, always a decision someone made, always a system that failed someone first that you can trace back to and say, that is where everything started. If this kind of content is your thing, subscribe and watch this next video because it goes exactly where you think it's going and somehow still surprises you.